Good morning and welcome to the African Television Channel broadcasting from the city of Atlanta. Of course, from the Clark Atlanta studio in Atlanta, we are reaching you live. Africa matters. Africa is the future. And that is the main thing that is actually propelling the atmosphere of the world today. Well, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a step. We started the campaign during the Centennial Olympics in 1996, but up to today, it is vibrant in every mind that everybody knows that Africa is the emerging market opportunity of the world today. The 44th President of America made history by being the first president to address the African leaders this year in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He said, Africa matters. Africa is the future. He said Africa is on the move. He said Africa is the cradle of civilization, the birth of mankind. He said Africa shaped the destiny of America. All these are statements of truth. And if you believe him and believe what we have done, bridging the gap and building the bridge, bringing the emerging marketing opportunity and potential of the world from Africa to the United States, then creating human resources and capacity building, turning brain drain into brain gain. These are some of the important things that is now reshaping the economy of the world. Africa is a goal in America. America is a goal in Africa. He said it and he made some vibrant statements in Addis Ababa. We all love the 44th President of America telling the truth and showing the world that it is without Africa, the world is a vacuum. This is where we are today. We started with the exhibition Celebrate Africa in 1996 Olympics. Now it has graduated to the African House in 5 cities in America. One will be in Montgomery, Alabama, one in Atlanta, Georgia, one in New York, one in Washington, and one in Los Angeles. Now, these are the places whereby the destiny of the economy of Africa and the economy of diaspora here in America will be determined. Please enjoy the eloquent speech of the 44th President of America, President Barack Obama.
I've been amazed at all the wonderful work that's being done here. And it's true that the elections that took place here occurred without violence. But as I discussed with Prime Minister Haile Mariam, that's just the start of democracy. I believe Ethiopia will not fully unleash the potential of its people if journalists are restricted or legitimate opposition groups can't participate in the campaign process. And to his credit, the Prime Minister acknowledged that more work will need to be done for Ethiopia to be a full-fledged, sustainable democracy. So these are conversations we have to have as friends. You know, American democracy is not perfect. We've worked for many years. But one thing we do is we continually re-examine to figure out how can we make our democracy better. And that's a source of strength for us, being willing to look and see honestly what we need to be doing to fulfill the promise of our founding documents. And every country has to go through that process. No country is perfect, but we have to be honest and strive to expand freedoms, to broaden democracy. The bottom line is that when citizens cannot exercise their rights, the world has a responsibility to speak out. And America will, even if it's sometimes uncomfortable. Even when it's sometimes directed towards our friends. And I know that there are some countries that don't say anything. And maybe that's easier to, for leaders to deal with. But you're kind of stuck with us. This is how we are. We believe in these things. We're going to keep on talking about it. And I want to repeat, we do this not because we think our democracy is perfect or we think that every country has to follow precisely our path. For more than 2 centuries since our independence, we're still working on perfecting our union. We're not immune from criticism. When we fall short of our ideals, we strive to do better. But when we speak out for our principles, at home and abroad, we stay true to our values, and we help lift up the lives of people beyond our borders. And we think that's important. And it's especially important, I believe, for those of us of African descent, because we've known what it feels like to be on the receiving end of injustice. We know what it means to be discriminated against. We know what it means to be jailed. So how can we stand by when it's happening to somebody else? I'll be frank with you, it can't just be America that's talking about these things. Fellow African countries have to talk about these things. Just as other countries championed your break from colonialism, our nations must all raise our voices when universal rights are being denied. For if we truly believe that Africans are equal in dignity, that Africans have an equal right to freedoms that are universal, that's a principle we all have to defend. And it's not just a Western idea, it's a human idea. I have to also say that Africa's democratic progress is also at risk when leaders refuse to step aside when their terms end. Now, let me be honest with you. I do not understand this. I am in my second term. It has been an extraordinary privilege for me to serve as the President of the United States. I cannot imagine a greater honor or a more interesting job. I love my work. But under our Constitution, I cannot run again. I can't run again. I actually think I'm a pretty good president. I think if I ran, I could win. But I can't. So there's a lot that I'd like to do to keep America moving, but the law is the law. And no one person is above the law, not even the president. And I'll be honest with you, I'm looking forward to life after being president. I won't have such a big security detail all the time. It means I can go take a walk. I can spend time with my family. I can find other ways to serve. I can visit Africa more often. The point is, I don't understand why people want to stay so long. Especially when they've got a lot of money. When a leader tries to change the rules in the middle of the game just to stay in office, it risks instability and strife, as we've seen in Burundi. And this is often just a first step down a perilous path. And sometimes you'll hear a leader say, well, I'm the only person who can hold this nation together. If that's true, then that leader has failed to truly build their nation. You look at Nelson Mandela. Madiba, like George Washington, forged a lasting legacy, not only because of what they did in office, but because they were willing to leave office and transfer power peacefully. And just as the African Union has condemned coups and illegitimate transfers of power, the AU's authority and strong voice can also help the people of Africa ensure that their leaders abide by term limits and their constitutions. Nobody should be president for life. And your country's better off if you have new blood and new ideas. I'm still a pretty young man. I'm still a pretty young man, but I know that somebody with new energy and new insights will be good for my country. It will be good for yours too in some cases. Africa's progress will also depend on security and peace, because an essential part of human dignity is being safe and free from fear. In Angola, Mozambique, Liberia, Sierra Leone, we've seen conflicts end and countries work to rebuild. But from Somalia and Nigeria to Mali and Tunisia, terrorists continue to target innocent civilians. Many of these groups claim the banner of religion, but hundreds of millions of African Muslims know that Islam means peace. And we must call groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIL, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, we must call them what they are: murderers. In the face of threats, Africa and the African Union has shown leadership. Because of the AU force in Somalia, Al-Shabaab controls less territory and the Somali government is growing stronger. In Central Africa, the AU-led mission continues to degrade the Lord's Resistance Army. In the Lake Chad Basin, forces from several nations with the backing of the AU are fighting to end Boko Haram's senseless brutality. And today we salute all those who serve to protect the innocent, including so many brave African peacekeepers. Now, as Africa stands against terror and conflict, I want you to know that the United States stands with you. With training and support, we're helping African forces grow stronger. The United States is supporting the AU's effort to strengthen peacekeeping, and we're working with countries in the region to deal with emerging crises with the African Peacekeeping Rapid Response Partnership. The world must do more to help as well. This fall at the United Nations, I will host a summit to secure new commitments to strengthen international support for peacekeeping, including here in Africa. And building on commitments that originated here in the AU, we'll work to develop a new partnership between the UN and the AU that can provide reliable support for AU peace operations. If African governments and international partners step up with strong support, we can transform how we work together to promote security and peace in Africa. Now, our efforts to ensure our shared security must be matched by a commitment to improved governance. Those things are connected. Good governance is one of the best weapons against terrorism and instability. Our fight against terrorist groups, for example, will never be won if we fail to address legitimate grievances that terrorists may try to exploit, if we don't build trust with all communities, if we don't uphold the rule of law. There's a saying, and I believe it is true: if we sacrifice liberty in the name of security, we risk losing both. This same seriousness of purpose is needed to end conflicts. In the Central African Republic, the spirit of dialogue recently shown by ordinary citizens must be matched by leaders committed to inclusive elections and a peaceful transition. In Mali, the comprehensive peace agreement must be fulfilled. And leaders in Sudan must know their nation will never truly thrive so long as they wage war against their own people. The world will not forget about Darfur. In South Sudan, the joy of independence has descended into the despair of violence. I was there at the United Nations when we held up South Sudan as the promise of a new beginning. And neither Mr. Kiir nor Mr. Machar have shown so far any interest in sparing their people from this suffering or reaching a political solution. Yesterday I met with leaders from this region. We agree that given the current situation, Mr. Kiir and Mr. Machar must reach an agreement by August 17th, because if they do not, I believe the international community must raise the costs of intransigence. And the world awaits the report of the AU Commission of Inquiry, because accountability for atrocities must be part of any lasting peace in Africa's youngest nation. And finally, Africa's progress will depend on upholding the human rights of all people, for if each of us is to be treated with dignity, each of us must be sure to also extend that same dignity to others. As president, I make it a point to meet with many of our young African leaders, and one was a young man from Senegal. He said something wonderful about being together with so many of his African brothers and sisters. He said, "Here I have met Africa, the Africa I've always believed in. She's beautiful, she's young, she's full of talent and motivation and ambition." I agree. Africa is the beautiful, talented daughters who are just as capable as Africa's sons. And as a father, I believe that my two daughters have to have the same chance to pursue their dreams as anybody's son, and that same thing holds true for girls here in Africa. Our girls have to be treated the same. We can't let old traditions stand in the way. The march of history shows that we have the capacity to broaden our moral imaginations. We come to see that some traditions are good for us. They keep us grounded. But that in our modern world, other traditions set us back. When African girls are subjected to the mutilation of their bodies or forced into marriage at the ages of 9 or 10 or 11, that sets us back. That's not a good tradition. It needs to end. When more than 80% of new HIV cases in the hardest hit countries are teenage girls, that's a tragedy. That sets us back. So America's beginning a partnership with 10 African countries: Kenya, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, South Africa, Swaziland, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, to keep teenage girls safe and AIDS-free. And when girls cannot go to school, and grow up not knowing how to read or write, that denies the world future women engineers, future women doctors, future women business owners, future women presidents. That sets us all back. That's a bad tradition, not providing our girls the same education as our sons. I was saying in Kenya, nobody would put out a football team and then just play half the team. You'd lose. The same is true when it comes to getting everybody an education. You can't leave half the team off, our young women. So as part of America's support for the education and the health of our daughters, my wife, Michelle, is helping to lead a global campaign, including a new effort in Tanzania and Malawi, with a simple message: let girls learn. Let girls learn so they grow up healthy and they grow up strong, and that will be good for families, and they will raise smart, healthy children, and that will be good for every one of your nations. Africa is the beautiful, strong women that these girls grow up to become. The single best indicator of whether a nation will succeed is how it treats its women. When women have health care and women have education, families are stronger, communities are more prosperous, children do better in school, nations are more prosperous. Look at the amazing African women here in this hall. If you want your country to grow and succeed, you have to empower your women. And if you want to empower more women, America will be your partner. Let's work together. Let's work together to stop sexual assault and domestic violence. Let's make clear that we will not tolerate rape as a weapon of war. It's a crime, and those who commit it must be punished. Let's lift up the next generation of women leaders who can help fight injustice and forge peace and start new businesses and create jobs. And some might hire some men, too. We'll all be better off when women have equal futures. And Africa is the beautiful tapestry of your cultures and ethnicities and races and religions. Last night, we saw this amazing dance troupe made up of street children who had formed a dance troupe, and they performed for the Prime Minister and myself. And there are 80 different languages, and I don't know how many ethnic groups. And there were like 30 different dances that were being done, and the Prime Minister was trying to keep up with, okay, I think that's one Zomoro, and they were moving fast. And that diversity here in Ethiopia is representative of diversity all throughout Africa. And that's a strength. Now, yesterday I had the privilege to view Lucy. You may know Lucy. She's our ancestor, more than 3 million years old. In this tree of humanity, with all of our branches and diversity, we all go back to the same root. We're all one family. We're all one tribe. And yet so much of the suffering in our world stems from our failure to remember that, to not recognize ourselves in each other. We think because somebody's skin is slightly different, or their hair is slightly different, or their religious faith is differently expressed, or they speak a different language, that it justifies somehow us treating them with less dignity. And that becomes the source of so many of our problems. And we think somehow that we make ourselves better by putting other people down. And that becomes the source of so many of our problems. When we begin to see each other as somehow less than ourselves, when we succumb to these artificial divisions of faith or sect or tribe or ethnicity, then even the most awful abuses are justified in the minds of those who are thinking in those ways. And in the end, abusers lose their own humanity as well. Nelson Mandela taught us to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. Every one of us is equal. Every one of us has worth. Every one of us matters. And when we respect the freedom of others, no matter the color of their skin or how they pray or who they are or who they love, we are all more free. Your dignity depends on my dignity, and my dignity depends on yours. Imagine if everyone had that spirit in their hearts. Imagine if governments operated that way. Just imagine what the world could look like, the future that we could bequeath these young people. Yes, in our world, old thinking can be a stubborn thing. That's one of the reasons why we need term limits. Old people think old ways. And you can see my gray hair, I'm getting old. The old ways can be stubborn, but I believe the human heart is stronger. I believe hearts can change. I believe minds can open. That's how change happens. That's how societies move forward. It's not always a straight line. Step by halting step. Sometimes you go forward, you move back a little bit. But I believe we are marching, we are pointing towards ideals of justice and equality. That's how your nations won independence, not just with rifles, but with principles and ideals. That's how African Americans won our civil rights. That's how South Africans, black and white, tore down apartheid. That's why I can stand before you today as the first African American president of the United States. New thinking, unleashing growth that creates opportunity, promoting development that lifts all people out of poverty, supporting democracy that gives citizens their say, advancing the security and justice that delivers peace, respecting the human rights of all people. These are the keys to progress, not just in Africa, but around the world. And this is the work that we can do together. And I am hopeful. As I prepare to return home, my thoughts are with that same young man from Senegal who said, "Here I have met Africa, the Africa I have always believed in. She is beautiful and young, full of talent and motivation and ambition. To which I would simply add, as you build the Africa you believe in, you will have no better partner, no better friend than the United States of America. God bless Africa. God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Vision, they say, is greater than ambition. The 44th President of America has really, really drilled the message, has given us what Africa stands for and what America stands for. Joining the hand, bridging the gap, and building the bridge between Africa, the 55 nations of Africa, and America is a task that must be done. It's a task that will propel the economy of the world. It's a task that will unify people immaterial of color, of race, of gender. It is a task that will now turn brain drain into brain gain. It is a task that will now deliver human resources and capacity for sustainable development. Well, if the world is really achieving and acclaiming and also appreciating the effort of the 44th President of America, here we go. America winning in Africa, Africa winning in America. Thanks for watching.